I'm Nicole Miller. I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm the founder of Explore Your Coast. We are a team of professional comms, marine scientists, and marine conservation people, and we are all volunteering our time to inspire New Zealanders to connect to the ocean, to raise awareness around our local marine environments and why they play a vital role in the ecosystem. And we support communities to become active ocean stewards through citizen science and other work streams.
That's marvelous. And the very first obvious question is that you don't sound like a Kiwi.
Yes.
How did you end up down there?
I'm from Bavaria. And I always thought at some stage I'll go scuba diving. And I've studied chemistry, so I'm a scientist by trade, but I'm not a marine biologist.
Yeah.
And I came to New Zealand for a postdoc. So I ended up at Auckland University. And the university has a very active dive club. So eventually I had the chance to go diving. And I was super lucky because the first open water dives were at the Poor Knights Islands, like a famous marine reserve.
Yeah.
I dropped in the water. Back in the day, we still had the waterproof 24-shot single-use cameras. And I had one with me because, of course, I had no idea what I was doing anyway. Took a photo and I'm like, oh, this is a big fish. I'll take a photo of this. Turned out it was bronze whaler shark. So
nice.
First underwater photo ever is a bronze whaler shark. And of course, the lush seaweed forest, the sharks, the marine life at the Poor Knights just hooked me instantly. And I got really curious about the photography and sharing what I see. And then I got more interested into species through photography and where species live. And that sort of got me into the ecosystem side of things. And then I moved to Wellington and I continued my scuba diving journey there, became a PADI instructor and did other dive training as well. And eventually I went on a trip back to Europe and I stopped on the west coast of America and we went for a dive off Catalina Islands in these amazing kelp forests, giant kelp, sea bass, harbor seals. So after I came back to New Zealand, I was like, what kelp forests do we have here? And one of my friends is a proper marine and seaweed expert, and she's got giant kelp right here. And I'm like, how come nobody's talking about giant kelp forests in Wellington? And kelp forest is an ecosystem anyway. So I started a giant kelp monitoring project, very basic. Just snorkel twice a year around a kelp forest, look at the coverage of the canopy on the surface, and look at the summer water temperature to see what impacts warming waters have on the kelp forest. And we could really see that warm summers, the next monitoring dive, the kelp forest canopy was a lot smaller. So we are right at the northernmost boundary for giant kelp, and it's just hanging on. But after a few years, we saw increasing barren areas and more visible sea urchin, our native kinna.
Right.
And then we started looking at kinna and kinna barren. And now what we can see is devastating of kelp forests. Of course, all around New Zealand, it's a topic now, but everywhere where there's not enough natural predators. And in New Zealand, those are rock lobsters and a lot of the finfish species, snapper, blue cod, moki, all of those wrasses. And of course, fishing pressure and overfishing leads to the disappearance of those predators. The numbers explode. The urchins also don't need to hide, so they start walking up the reef and they very quickly eat entire kelp forests. So it takes probably 6-7 years to build up the numbers. And that's what we've seen slowly happening. And then within 1, 2, 3 years, entire kelp forests are gone. And we captured that loss of kelp forest on our local reefs. And what happened then was that I did a lot of different photogrammetry, GPS track monitoring, counting dives. So we knew quite good what we are dealing with. I've passed that information on to our local indigenous tribe, Whanoi, the office, and they were really interested. So we applied for permits and I did support the iwi shaping that up. And we got a permit through the ministry for the iwi. And the iwi then led culturally appropriate removal of those urchins. I coordinated the volunteers.
Okay.
And we removed 12,000 urchins from 250-meter coastline.
Wow.
It's one dive site. And it's only a harbor reef, so our reef only goes down to 6-7 meters. It's not a huge area, so there's thousands of those urchins around. But what was really cool is after monitoring the decline over 3 years, which was heart-wrenching, we actually saw after 5 months the recovery already, and the kelp forest started to really nicely grow back. Now, 2 years later, we can see giant kelp right to the deep areas of the reef.
That's awesome. Because
Yeah.
there's giant kelp that grows at an exceptional speed.
Yes, exactly. So if it has a chance, and if it's got the right conditions, it grows really quickly. But we can't have too much grazing pressure.
Yeah.
And that's the urgent. But really, it comes back to actually overfishing, because we need crayfish, rock lobsters, and all these fish on the reef to keep the small numbers in check, but also induce the feeling that there's predation on the reef, because that keeps the urchins hiding.
Yeah.
And then they only eat the kelp that floats by, rather than actively foraging and really going really quickly over the reefs. Yeah.
So what is it that people can do, or how is it going to be, or how are you going to try and control it going forward? Is there a plan in place to make marine park areas or larger groups of volunteers to go and get rid of the sea urchins?
Yeah, so what we know is that to really have a long-term effective monitoring and management plan in place as well, first thing is people need to know that there's a problem and there's not enough marine monitoring from a professional capacity, research, fisheries scientists who are going out and doing all the monitoring. And we don't have enough citizen science divers, because usually it's the locals who feel the change first. And in New Zealand, we can see people around the country really calling out for more protected areas, because they actually see and feel that they can't get their local fish and seafood species anymore. But that's already too late. So ideally, we still do something while we still have kelp forests that we can restore or make more resilient. And around the north coast of New Zealand, we've got really extended reefs. And the population of urchins everywhere around the country is already so high that we can't possibly harvest our way out. It's a biodiversity crisis, and fishing to solve a biodiversity crisis doesn't help. So what we really need is we can have local efforts. There's place for commercial urchin divers, yes. There's place for local communities to create their own ways of managing the marine environment. I think that's really important, because it's the locals who need to do that. If they are not getting a chance to have a say what species they like, what their ambitions are for the marine environment, then it's really hard to implement that locally. So local community groups, Hapu particularly, that's our indigenous, more on a family level. Groups have a really good say, and of course iwi as well, because a lot of the iwi hold fishing quota. They have to be involved in conversations as well. At the end, what we want is a more resilient ecosystem. Can be different things, can be indigenous traditional methods of management, can be more marine preserves, can be highly protected areas, different ways to manage it. We want more resilient ecosystems, so we have fisheries into the future.
Yes.
And at the moment, a lot of the political way in New Zealand is actually pushing harder for commercial side of things and really not looking at the long-term effects. And I think we would be much better off long-term if we do all of this, but predator control and rebuilding predators, rock lobsters and other finfishes is key in any long-term plan.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we start seeing an Australian species more often now in New Zealand.
Okay.
So we get a black long-spined urchin, which has decimated 2,000 kilometers of Australia's coast already. Those urchins go much deeper. So we can see those urchins in 35, 30 meters. Nobody would harvest those. And they decimate all the deep reefs in the northeast. The only way to get those urchins really is natural predators and more fish and crayfish in the water.
I know you're here to spread the word of what we've just been talking about, but for everybody who's watching now, I'd just like you to express what it feels like for you to be in the water, not the stress moments of trying to count all your urchins and see all of this beautiful kelp forest, but what it actually feels and means to you.
Yeah, underwater is my happy place. It's so cool. You can go into the water, and we're really lucky. We've got the only fully protected no-take marine reserve in the world on the shores of a capital city. So if you go into the marine reserve, it's just so nice. You see everything. It's just the abundance and the colorfulness of the marine environment. It's just giving you so much, me personally, so much satisfaction. Then you also never know what there's still things that I come across that are understriped, or people go, oh, that's something unusual, which is super cool. And it's just so nice to see that. And I take a lot of cameras with me. I've also got 360 cameras that I take along. So what I'm trying through photos, 360 videos, I set up QR codes along the coast as well. And it's just so nice to show people and give people a chance who don't get that feeling. And particularly putting on a 360 headset, apart from getting wet, it's like the next best thing what you can do to people. And a lot of people can't, for cultural or for physical reasons and limitations, go in the water. So getting people a chance to explore the marine reserve through fully immersive 360 videos is the next best thing. But I do encourage people to go snorkel and dive, because it's just a life-changing thing. And my life definitely changed since I've started scuba diving.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us, and good luck with your presentations that you've got here this weekend.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great
and
pleasure.
we'll touch base in the not too distant future, and let's get you on and do a long form video.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.